Dr. Nnamdi Okoye, a man whose world was built on numbers and power, never noticed the small details. But when he visited the construction site of his new Enugu mansion, he couldn't tear his eyes away from one woman. She moved with a quiet dignity, carrying blocks on her head under the scorching sun. Her name was Chidinma, and in a single glance, she began to dismantle the walls of his carefully constructed life, leading him down a path he never saw coming. "Hello, bestie. Welcome. Please stay with me as I unfold this interesting romantic story. If you enjoy the story, please support us by subscribing to this channel and hit the notification button for more. Thank you. Grab your popcorn, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story." Dr. Nnamdi Okoye was not a man who noticed things. He noticed numbers, the rising value of his real estate portfolio, the number of zeros on his bank statements, the percentage growth of his investment in a new tech startup. He had built his empire on precision, on calculated risks, and on a ruthless focus that left no room for frivolous details. The sprawling, unfinished mansion in the rolling hills of Enugu was a testament to his success. It was a project born of a simple desire, to own a piece of earth as grand as his ambition. The house was his latest masterpiece, the crown jewel of his holdings, and he had come to the site on a rare Friday afternoon to ensure that every single brick and beam was in perfect alignment with his vision. The midday sun was a relentless tyrant, beating down on the dusty ground. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of freshly mixed cement and the earthy smell of the red laterite soil. Nnamdi stood under the shade of a large, expensive-looking umbrella, his tailored Italian suit a stark contrast to the grit and grime of the construction site. He was in his element, his mind running through the project timeline, the material costs, the projected completion date. He watched the organized chaos with a detached, clinical eye. Men hauled heavy bags of concrete with grunts of effort. Others mixed the mortar, their shovels scraping against the ground in a rhythmic, monotonous beat. But it was the women who fascinated him, in their brightly colored head ties and worn clothes, carrying stacks of red blocks on their heads. It was a rhythm he'd seen countless times, a dance of strength and resilience that was the backbone of his industry. Yet today something was different. His gaze, which usually swept over the scene, snagged on one woman. Her movements were not just efficient. They were precise, almost elegant. She had a tower of blocks balanced on her head, a precarious load that seemed far too heavy for her slender frame. Yet, she moved with an effortless dignity, her spine straight, her shoulders square. Her steps were measured and deliberate, a silent testament to years of practiced balance. A bead of sweat, a single perfect drop, trickled down her temple, but she didn't falter. Her skin, the color of rich mahogany, glistened in the sun's harsh light, and her facial features were carved with a delicate artistry that held a quiet strength. As she reached the building site and carefully lowered the blocks to the ground, she looked up, and for a fleeting moment their eyes met. Nnamdi felt a jolt, a sudden, unexpected electric shock that went straight to his core. Her eyes were a deep, calm brown, holding a quiet strength he found unsettling. There was no subservience in them, no deference to his status. Only a clear, direct gaze that saw him, truly saw him, for who he was, not Dr. Okoye, the billionaire, but simply a man watching her. He quickly looked away, a muscle twitching in his jaw. He felt annoyed, irritated by this unbidden distraction, by this small intrusion into his carefully ordered world. He snapped a command at his site manager, a brusque question about the reinforcement steel, and turned to walk back to his waiting SUV. As the air-conditioned vehicle hummed to life and he was driven away from the dust and noise, the image of the woman lingered. It was a ghost in his machine, a glitch in his meticulously programmed life. He saw her face in the numbers on his spreadsheets, in the reflection of his office window. It was a curiosity he couldn't shake. It was more than a fleeting impression. It was a quiet, persistent whisper in his mind. He told himself it was a matter of professional interest, a logical conclusion. He needed to understand the efficiency of his labor force, the source of such quiet resilience. This was nothing more than an analytical problem to be solved, a variable he hadn't accounted for in his calculations. This was the story he told himself to justify the unsettling pull he felt, the unbidden fascination with a woman who carried blocks on her head, her quiet strength a mystery he felt compelled to unravel. Back in his penthouse office in Ikoyi, Lagos, Dr. Nnamdi Okoye found himself a stranger to his own routine. The sleek, minimalist space, a monument to his success, felt different. He sat behind a large mahogany desk, the city skyline a glittering, hazy backdrop to his window. But he wasn't seeing the city. He was seeing the dust of Enugu, the harsh sun, and a tower of red blocks. The woman's face, Chidinma's face, was a ghost in his machine, a glitch in his meticulously programmed life. He tried to dismiss it, to file it away under anomalous data. He pulled up a spreadsheet detailing his investment portfolio, a document filled with impressive figures and projections. But between the rows of numbers, he saw her quiet, direct gaze. When he glanced at the ticker tape on his screen, the blinking green and red lights morphed into the beads of sweat on her forehead. The image was a persistent, nagging whisper in his mind. This was not normal. Nnamdi prided himself on his laser-like focus. He had built his empire by shutting out distractions, by seeing people as assets and liabilities, not as individuals. He had a fiancée, a beautiful socialite named Kemi, whose primary function seemed to be to complement his status. They had a polite, transactional relationship built on shared social circles and a mutual understanding of ambition. Kemi was a known quantity, a perfect puzzle piece in his perfect life. Chidinma, on the other hand, was an unpredictable variable. She was a woman of earth and labor, a world away from his polished, air-conditioned reality. He found himself inventing excuses to get away from his office. He told his assistant he had an important site meeting, but instead of the usual high-level discussions, he found himself driving, almost compulsively, through the city, his mind replaying that fleeting moment on the construction site. He even considered calling his site manager, Mr. Uche, to ask a few more questions about the workforce, but the thought felt ridiculous. What would he say? Tell me more about the woman with the green head tie who carries blocks? Sounded insane even to him. The feeling was more than just curiosity. It was a profound, unshakable sense of being seen. Nnamdi was accustomed to being admired, envied, and respected, but he was rarely, if ever, seen for who he was. In that one brief moment, Chidinma had looked at him without the filter of his wealth. There was no awe, no fear, just a simple, unadorned acknowledgement of his presence. It was a mirror he had never looked into before, and the reflection was both unsettling and magnetic. He couldn't shake the image of her. Her strength, her grace, the quiet dignity with which she carried her burden. It was all a powerful contrast to the gilded cage of his own life. He saw her face in the numbers on his spreadsheets, in the reflection of his office window. It was a curiosity he couldn't shake. He told himself it was a matter of professional interest. He needed to understand the efficiency of his labor force, the source of such quiet resilience. This was nothing more than an analytical problem to be solved, a variable he hadn't accounted for in his calculations. This was the story he told himself to justify the unsettling pull he felt, the unbidden fascination with a woman who carried blocks on her head, her quiet strength a mystery he felt compelled to unravel. The quiet whisper in Nnamdi's mind had become a persistent voice. It spoke of a woman with a tower of bricks on her head and a gaze that saw straight through his polished veneer. He couldn't dismiss it as professional curiosity any longer. It felt more like a summons. The following week, he found a reason to return to Enugu, a flimsy excuse about checking on the quality of imported granite. He knew it was a lie, a flimsy veil over his true purpose. He was driven by an unbidden compulsion to see her again. This time he arrived unannounced. He dismissed his driver a short distance from the site, wanting to approach it on foot, to shed the trappings of his wealth for a brief moment. The hot air, thick with the smell of cement, hit him like a physical force, but this time he didn't mind. He walked onto the site, his sharp shoes crunching on the gravel, a foreign sound in this landscape of calloused hands and dusty feet. He found the site manager, a hardworking and perpetually stressed man named Mr. Uche, near the main foundation. Mr. Uche's face lit up with surprise and a touch of panic. Dr. Okoye, sir, you didn't tell us you were coming. We would have prepared. No need, Mr. Uche, Namdi said, his voice calm, but with an edge of impatience. I just wanted to observe the operations. Everything seems to be moving along well. His eyes, however, were scanning the worksite, searching for a flash of a green head tie. He found her near the rear of the building, her back to him, lifting a stack of blocks with practiced ease. I have a question for you, Mr. Uche, Namdi said, his gaze fixed on her. The woman who carries the blocks. The one with the green head tie. Who is she? Mr. Uche followed his gaze, his brow furrowed in confusion. He had 100 workers on site. Why was his boss asking about one woman who carried bricks? Her. Sir? That is Chidinma. Chidinma Okafor. She is a very hard worker. One of the best we have, always on time and never complains. The name felt like a key turning in a lock. Chidinma. It was a beautiful name, one that suited the quiet strength he had seen in her. He thanked Mr. Uche, his mind already spinning. He spent the next hour walking the site, but his observations were anything but professional. He watched her from a distance, feeling like a spy in his own life. He saw her during a brief break, sitting with other laborers, her face animated as she laughed at a joke. Her smile was bright and genuine, transforming her features and making him feel a pang he couldn't name. He watched as she unwrapped her lunch, a small mound of akpu and a container of ogbono soup. There was a simple elegance in her every motion, in the way she ate her food with her hands, in the way she listened intently as a coworker spoke. She wasn't just a worker. She was a person with a rich inner world he was desperate to know. He found himself thinking about her when he was negotiating multi-million naira deals, a quiet voice asking what she would think of it all. Would she be impressed? Or would she find the opulence meaningless, a distraction from the real work of living? The curiosity turned into something more profound. It was a gravitational pull, an undeniable force that was reorienting his entire world. He knew he had to talk to her, not as a boss to a worker, but as one person to another. The thought filled him with a strange mix of nervousness and excitement, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. The following Saturday was different. Namdi didn't send his driver to Enugu. He drove himself, a rare act that felt both liberating and terrifying. The drive gave him time to think, to rehearse what he would say. He, Dr. Namdi Okoye, the man who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals, was nervous about a conversation with a construction worker. The irony was not lost on him. He knew he couldn't approach her in his usual manner, with the air of authority and ownership. He had to be just Namdi, a person, not a persona. When he arrived at the site, the morning sun was already warm. The air was a symphony of sounds. The clinking of shovels, the shouts of men, the rhythmic thud of blocks being stacked. He saw her immediately, her green head tie a beacon in the sea of yellow hard hats and dusty clothes. She was working with another woman, her laughter ringing out, light and clear. He took a deep breath, his heart thumping in a rhythm he hadn't felt since his university days, and walked towards her. As he got closer, she saw him. Her smile faded, replaced by a look of polite confusion. She recognized him as the man who had been watching her. "Good morning," Namdi said, his voice surprisingly soft. Chidinma nodded, her eyes calm and direct. "Good morning, sir." He didn't know what to say. His rehearsed lines about work efficiency and logistics felt hollow and inauthentic. He decided to abandon the script. I've been watching you work," he said, the words feeling clumsy. "You carry those blocks with such grace." Chidinma's confusion was replaced by a small, amused smile. "It's just work, sir," she said, her voice a gentle melody. "After a while, the head gets used to the weight. It's like a friend you carry on your head all day." Namdi was struck by her response. He had expected a simple thank you, perhaps a hurried retreat. Instead, she had offered a piece of her philosophy, a poetic description of her difficult labor. "A friend," he repeated, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "That's a beautiful way to put it. My name is Namdi.
Namdi Okoye.
He extended a hand. She hesitated for a brief moment, then wiped her dusty hands on her trousers and shook his. Her grip was firm and surprisingly strong. My name is Chidinma, she said. Chidinma, he said, the name feeling natural on his tongue. I'm the one who owns this land, the one who is building this house. Chidinma's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise, but no fear. Ah, she said, her voice quiet. I thought you were a supervisor. It's a very big house. It is, he said, but I'm more interested in the people building it. He gestured around. Everyone here, they're the true artists, bringing it to life, block by block. The words, true as they were, felt strange coming from his lips. Chidinma looked at him, her gaze thoughtful. She saw a man in an expensive shirt, a man who spoke with a different cadence than anyone she knew, but she also saw a man who seemed genuinely interested in her life, a man whose eyes held a flicker of loneliness that she, in her own simple way, understood. She didn't know it, but this was the first step in building something far more significant than any mansion. Their conversations began to grow, stretching from minutes into hours. They started with the construction site, a neutral ground where their two disparate worlds briefly intersected. Namdi asked her about her work, about the physical toll it took. Chidinma, in turn, spoke of the satisfaction of seeing a building rise from the ground, of the camaraderie among the workers, of the quiet pride she felt in her contribution. But soon, their talks ventured beyond the dusty site. He learned of her family, her widowed mother, and the siblings she was helping to put through school. He discovered her dreams of saving enough to open a small provision store, not just for profit, but to serve her community. He saw a woman who carried the weight of her family's hopes with the same quiet strength she used to carry blocks on her head. Her life was a tapestry woven with hard work, responsibility, and an unwavering sense of purpose. She, in turn, saw past the expensive suits and the impressive title to the man beneath. She asked him about his own story, not as the billionaire everyone knew, but as the boy who grew up in the bustling streets of Lagos. He found himself telling her things he had never told anyone else, of the pressure to succeed, the loneliness that came with immense wealth, and the constant burden of expectations. He spoke of the transactional nature of his relationships, the way people treated him like a walking bank account. He confessed that for all his money, he felt a profound emptiness, a lack of genuine connection. Chidinma listened without judgment, her deep brown eyes holding a silent understanding. She didn't offer solutions or platitudes. She simply offered her presence, a rare and precious gift. She saw the man who was lonely and burdened by his own success, and she felt a deep empathy for him. His world of private jets and boardroom deals seemed shallow compared to her world of hard work and simple joys. He fell in love with her not for her beauty, but for her soul. He knew this was not a whim, but a profound and life-changing truth. Namdi's return to Lagos was different this time. The city's high rises and frantic energy, once a source of pride and power, now felt suffocating. His penthouse, with its sweeping views and state-of-the-art amenities, seemed less like a sanctuary and more like a gilded cage. He looked at his life, the private jet waiting on the tarmac, the fleet of luxury cars in his garage, the designer suits hanging in his closet, and saw only emptiness. His conversations with Chidinma had opened his eyes to a different kind of wealth, one that couldn't be measured in currency. She possessed a richness of spirit, a deep-seated joy in her work and her family that made his own achievements feel hollow. The simple act of carrying blocks on her head, of earning a day's wage through honest, back-breaking labor, held more dignity than all his boardroom victories. He thought of the people in his life. His friends were a revolving door of fellow billionaires and ambitious socialites, their conversations a sterile exchange of stock market tips and gossip. Their relationships were transactional, built on what they could gain from each other. His fiancée, Kemi, was the perfect example. Their upcoming marriage was a business merger, a logical next step in their parallel ascensions to the top of society. Then there was Chidinma. She had no idea of his net worth beyond his ownership of the land. She spoke to him not as a wealthy benefactor, but as a person. She listened to him with genuine empathy, not with the calculating air of someone looking for an angle. He found himself craving her company, her unpretentious wisdom, her radiant, authentic smile. He realized that for all his wealth, she possessed a richness of spirit he had never known. His world of private jets and boardrooms seemed shallow compared to her world of hard work and simple joys. He had built a life of immense value on paper, but in reality, it was a mansion without a foundation, a grand facade with nothing solid beneath. He was falling in love with her not for her physical beauty, but for her soul, for the strength and grace she embodied in a way he had never witnessed before. He knew this was not a whim, but a profound and life-changing truth. His world, once so predictable and orderly, was being irrevocably transformed by a woman who carried blocks on her head. The dusty construction site in Enugu, a place of hard labor and simple truths, had become Namdi's sanctuary. His weekly visits were no longer about checking on timelines or budgets. They were about spending time with Chidinma. Their conversations had taken on a new depth, moving from shared stories to a quiet, unspoken intimacy. He was learning to see his world through her eyes, and in doing so, he was revealing himself in ways he never thought possible. One afternoon, as they sat on a pile of concrete blocks during her lunch break, Namdi found himself speaking about his life in a way he had never done before. He talked about the immense pressure of his position, the constant fear of failure, and the isolation that came with his wealth. "Everyone wants something from me," he confessed, his voice low. "My employees want a promotion, my partners want a bigger cut, and the people in my social circle. They only see the name, Dr. Okoye. They don't see Namdi, the boy who once sold yams with his mother to pay for school fees." Chidinma listened, her expression thoughtful. She didn't interrupt with words of comfort or hollow assurances. She simply absorbed his vulnerability, her presence a calming anchor. She saw the lines of stress around his eyes, the weary slump of his shoulders that no expensive suit could hide. She realized that for all his immense wealth and power, he was a deeply lonely man. His confessions were a revelation to her. She had initially been in awe of his world, the private jets, the designer clothes, the effortless command he held. But through his words, she saw the cage his wealth had built around him. She saw a man who was surrounded by people but profoundly alone. She saw a man burdened by his success, a man who, despite having everything, seemed to have lost a part of himself. In that moment, their roles seemed to reverse. She was no longer just a laborer listening to a wealthy man's musings. She was a confidant, a quiet port in his stormy world. She saw past the expensive suits and the impressive title to the man who was lonely and burdened by his own success. She realized that for all his millions, he possessed a poverty of spirit that was far more profound than any lack of money. This understanding solidified her own feelings for him, shifting them from respect and admiration to something deeper and more compassionate. It was a love that was growing not from what he had, but from who he was, in all his raw, unguarded humanity. The weight of his revelation settled on Namdi like a heavy cloak. He had confessed his deepest fears and loneliest truths to a woman who worked with her hands, a woman who had, with a simple glance, shattered the illusion of his perfect life. The emptiness he had felt for so long wasn't a flaw in his character. It was a void left by a life lived without genuine connection. He found himself thinking of Chidinma constantly. Her quiet strength, her unpretentious wisdom, the way she had listened to him without judgment. It was all he could see. He looked at the vast, empty rooms of his mansion and no longer saw a monument to his success. He saw a cold, lonely place. He started to see his future, once so clear and predictable, as a path he no longer wanted to walk. His engagement to Kemi, once a logical step, now felt like a prison sentence. Their relationship, built on shared status and ambition, was a hollow echo of the intimacy he had found with Chidinma. One evening, as he stood on his balcony overlooking the glittering expanse of Lagos, he made a decision. It was a terrifying choice, one that went against every principle he had ever lived by. He would choose happiness over status, authenticity over expectation. He would choose Chidinma. He knew this was not a whim, but a profound and life-changing truth. He had fallen in love with her not for her beauty, but for her soul. Her world, so vibrant and real, had made his own seem like a pale imitation. He saw a future built not with cold, hard numbers but with the warmth of her presence. He knew he had to tell her, to ask her to build a life with him. He had built his empire on precision and cold logic, but this decision was based on something entirely different, something human and terrifying and gloriously real. He would go to Enugu and lay his heart bare, ready to risk everything for the one thing that truly mattered. The Enugu Hills, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, had become a sacred place for Nnamdi. It was a place where his two worlds, the one of opulence and the one of authenticity, collided. He had come to the construction site on a Friday, the end of a long week of board meetings and sterile negotiations, with a purpose far grander than any real estate deal. He was there to lay his heart bare. He found Chidinma as the workday was winding down. The rhythmic sounds of construction were fading, replaced by the quiet chatter of workers preparing to leave. She was sitting alone, her back against a newly built wall, her face tilted towards the cool evening breeze. She seemed at peace, a picture of quiet contentment. Nnamdi walked over to her, his heart a frantic drumbeat in his chest. "Chidinma," he said, his voice a little shaky. She opened her eyes, her gaze calm and questioning. "Nnamdi, you're here late." He sat down beside her, the rough concrete a stark contrast to the plush leather seats of his office. He took a deep breath, the air smelling of fresh cement and damp earth. "I need to tell you something," he began, his voice low and serious. "I'm not here to talk about the house anymore." Her expression remained unreadable, but a flicker of something, a mixture of apprehension and curiosity, passed through her eyes. "I am the owner of this house," he said, the words feeling heavy and insignificant all at once. "But I've been building a life for a very long time, and I've come to realize something. For all the wealth, for all the success, my life has been empty. It has been a house without a soul, a building without a foundation." He paused, searching for the right words. "But then I met you," he continued, turning to face her. "You carry blocks on your head, and you do it with more grace and dignity than anyone I've ever known. You see the world with a clarity I have lost. You have a richness of spirit that my entire empire can't buy. You are the foundation that has been missing from my life." He reached out and gently took her hand, his thumb stroking her calloused palm. "Chidinma," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am the owner of this house, but I want to build a life with you in it. I want to build a home with you, brick by brick, with a love that is more solid than any concrete. I love you." Chidinma was stunned, her mind reeling. The man she had come to admire was the very one who had built the house she helped construct, the one whose world was light years away from hers. She looked at him, not seeing the billionaire, but the man who had shared his loneliness with her, the man whose eyes now held a vulnerable hope. She saw sincerity and a love that was pure and true. In that moment, the immense gap between their two worlds seemed to shrink. She said yes, her heart overflowing with a hope she had never dared to dream of. The words hung in the air, heavy with a weight that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Nnamdi's confession, "I want to build a life with you in it," was not just a proposal. It was a promise, a dismantling of the worlds they had each known. Chidinma's mind reeled. The man she had come to admire was not a supervisor or a man of business, but the billionaire who owned the very ground she stood on. The man she had listened to, laughed with, and quietly fallen for was Dr. Nnamdi Okoye, a name that dominated headlines and boardrooms. For a moment, all she could do was stare. The immensity of his world, private jets, mansions, a life of effortless luxury, crashed against the reality of her own. The dust, the sweat, the simple dream of a provision store. Her heart hammered against her ribs, caught between the disbelief of the situation and the undeniable truth of his words. Could this be real? Was he truly offering her a place in a life so far beyond her imagination? But as she looked into his eyes, she saw no pretense, no game. She saw the same vulnerable Nnamdi who had confessed his loneliness, the man who had sought refuge in her quiet presence. She saw a sincerity that was as solid as the concrete around them. He was not offering her a fairy tale. He was offering a future built on the foundation they had already laid with their shared stories and quiet moments. He wasn't just in love with her. He was in love with her soul, with the woman who carried blocks on her head with grace and dignity. A profound calm settled over her. The gap between their two worlds, once an insurmountable chasm, suddenly seemed to shrink, overshadowed by the undeniable bond between them. Her life had taught her to recognize true strength, and she saw it not in his wealth, but in his vulnerability, in his willingness to break down his own walls for her. A soft smile touched her lips, a genuine, heartfelt expression that reached her eyes. Yes, she whispered, the single word carrying the weight of a lifetime of hope. Yes, Namdi, I will build a life with you. He let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. He took both of her hands in his, bringing them to his lips. He wasn't just promising her a grand mansion. He was promising to build a home with her, brick by brick, with a love that was stronger than any concrete. And in that moment, under the Enugu sky, a new foundation was laid, not for a house, but for a life built on a love as deep as the earth itself. The proposal under the Enugu sky marked the beginning of their secret courtship, a clandestine romance that unfolded in the shadow of the rising mansion. Namdi, a man accustomed to having his every move publicized, now found himself navigating a world of secrecy and quiet moments. He couldn't whisk Chidinma away on his private jet or take her to the exclusive restaurants of Lagos without triggering a social media frenzy and a storm of questions he wasn't ready to answer. Instead, their dates were simple, private, and steeped in a newfound intimacy. He would arrive at the construction site after the other workers had left, sometimes late in the evening. They would sit on the unfinished foundation of what would one day be their living room, sharing a flask of tea or a simple meal. They would talk for hours, the moon and stars their only witnesses. These were the moments Namdi cherished most. The conversations were no longer about who they were in the world, but about who they were to each other. Chidinma introduced him to her world. They took walks through her village, and she pointed out the landmarks of her childhood. The tree where she played with her siblings, the stream where she fetched water, the market where she dreamed of her future provision store. Namdi, a man who had traveled the world, found more wonder in these humble surroundings than in any foreign city. He was learning to appreciate the rhythm of a life he had never known. He, in turn, tried to show her his world, but on his terms. He drove her through the quiet, tree-lined streets of Enugu, explaining the intricacies of his business, the logic behind his investments. He gave her a phone, a simple one at first, so they could talk more freely. Their calls were filled with laughter and the kind of easy companionship that had been missing from his life. The secret courtship was a time of profound growth for both of them. Namdi learned patience and humility, discovering that true connection was built not on grand gestures, but on shared moments. Chidinma learned to trust, to believe in a love that defied all logic and social conventions. They were falling more deeply in love, building a bridge between their two worlds, one quiet, heartfelt conversation at a time. They were preparing for the storm they knew was coming, for the day they would have to reveal their love to a world that would never understand how a billionaire fell for the woman who carried blocks on her head. Namdi knew the secret courtship couldn't last forever. The truth had to come out, and he wanted to be the one to tell it. The logical starting point was his family, particularly his mother, a woman who held the keys to his world and whose approval was a non-negotiable part of his life. He also had to break the news to his fiancée, Kemi, a conversation he dreaded more than any hostile takeover. He chose a Sunday evening for the family meeting, a time typically reserved for quiet dinner at his mother's sprawling Ikoyi residence. The air was thick with the scent of roasted chicken and the unspoken tension that filled the room. His mother, a formidable woman named Madame Beatrice, sat at the head of the table, her face a mask of polite curiosity. His two younger sisters were also there, their phones forgotten on the table as they sensed the seriousness of the occasion. "There's something I need to tell you all," Namdi began, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. He explained his decision to call off his engagement to Kemi, the news landing like a bombshell. His mother's eyes narrowed, a silent demand for an explanation. I've met someone else, he continued, taking a deep breath. And she is the woman I want to marry. His mother scoffed, a short, sharp sound. Another society girl? Please, Namdi, this is a distraction. You have a business to run. She is not a society girl, Namdi said, his voice rising with conviction. Her name is Chidinma. She's from Enugu, and she works on my construction site. She carries blocks. The silence that followed was more deafening than any shout. His sisters exchanged shocked glances, but Madame Beatrice's face was a mixture of disbelief and fury. A common laborer? She finally spat, the words dripping with disdain. Namdi, have you lost your mind? What has this woman done to you? Is she using juju on you? This is a disgrace. What will people say? He had anticipated this reaction. She has done nothing but open my eyes, he said, his voice now a steady testament to his feelings. She is the most hardworking, genuine, and kind person I have ever met. She sees me for who I am, not for my money. And you think she is not interested in your money? His mother shot back. That is the oldest trick in the book. This is a social and financial disaster, Namdi. I forbid this. Mother, I am not asking for your permission, he said, standing up. I am telling you, I am in love with Chidinma, and I want you to meet her. You will see. She is not what you think. His mother remained seated, a picture of stony defiance. His sisters looked at him with a mixture of concern and intrigue. The grand reveal had been a disaster, but a necessary one. Namdi knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with judgment and skepticism. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't alone. He had Chidinma, and that was all the strength he needed to face the world. The day of the meeting arrived, cloaked in a tension as thick as the humid Lagos air. Namdi had arranged for Chidinma to meet his family at his penthouse, a more neutral ground than his mother's imposing mansion. He held her hand tightly in the car, feeling her nervousness. She was dressed simply but elegantly in a vibrant Ankara dress, her hair styled in a traditional updo. She looked beautiful, and her quiet strength was a palpable force beside him. Madame Beatrice sat on a plush sofa, her face a carefully constructed mask of polite judgment. Her daughters, Ifeoma and Chioma, were there as well, their curiosity battling with their loyalty to their mother. The introduction was stiff. Mother, Ifeoma, Chioma, this is Chidinma. Chidinma greeted them with a respectful bow, her voice steady and clear. It's a pleasure to meet you. Madame Beatrice's response was a sharp, assessing look that swept over Chidinma from head to toe. So, you are the one who has captured my son's heart, she said, her voice laced with skepticism. My son tells me you are a laborer. The word was said with a sting, as if it were a disease. Chidinma met her gaze directly. Yes, ma'am. I carry blocks on a construction site. I am proud of the work that I do. Madame Beatrice scoffed, leaning forward. And you believe my son, a man who owns half of Lagos, wants to marry you for love? You must think us fools. What is it you want from him? His money? His name? A lavish lifestyle you could never afford? Namdi bristled, ready to defend her. But Chidinma squeezed his hand, a silent request for him to remain calm. She turned to Madame Beatrice, her poise unwavering. Ma'am, I understand your suspicion. A love like ours is difficult to understand from the outside. I have never asked your son for anything. The only thing he has ever given me is his heart, and that is a gift more precious than any amount of money. I do not want his lavish lifestyle. I want a home with him, built on respect and true partnership. Her words hung in the air, a powerful testament to her character. She didn't cower, she didn't beg for acceptance. She spoke her truth with a quiet dignity that was impossible to ignore. Ifeoma and Chioma looked at each other, a flicker of admiration in their eyes. Madame Beatrice remained unconvinced, but the force of her anger seemed to have been blunted. She had expected a gold digger, a timid girl she could easily dismiss. Instead, she was faced with a woman of substance. The meeting ended without a full resolution, but it was a victory nonetheless. Chidinma had handled herself with a grace and strength that even Namdi had not fully anticipated. As they drove away, he looked at her with a newfound awe. "You were incredible," he said. Chidinma simply smiled. "I spoke from my heart, Namdi. I knew that was all I could do." The test had been passed. Chidinma had not only proven her genuine character, but had also begun to win over even his harshest critics. The foundation of their love, once built in secret, was now strong enough to withstand the scrutiny of his family. The engagement of Dr. Namdi Okoye to Chidinma Okafor sent shockwaves through Lagos society. The gossip columns were alight with speculation and disbelief. The tabloids called it the Cinderella story of the century, but to Namdi and Chidinma, it was a profound celebration of their love and a beautiful collision of two worlds. They decided that their wedding would be a reflection of this union. A grand affair that paid homage to his opulence while being deeply rooted in her traditions. The planning process became an act of compromise and a testament to their partnership. Namdi's wedding planner, a high-strung woman named Mrs. Adelik, presented a series of lavish ideas. A destination wedding in Paris, a reception with a live orchestra from London, and a guest list of thousands. Chidinma listened patiently, but her heart was in something else. "What about a traditional ceremony?" she asked quietly one afternoon. "In my village, we can have the Igbankwu, the wine-carrying ceremony. My family would be so proud." Namdi's eyes lit up. This was it. This was the authenticity he craved. He knew this would be a difficult idea for his family to accept, especially his mother, but he was resolute. "Yes," he said, taking her hand. "We will have both. A traditional ceremony in Enugu and a grand white wedding in Lagos." The fusion of their two cultures was a sight to behold. For the traditional marriage rites in Enugu, Namdi, the man who lived in suits, was measured for a custom-made Igbo chieftaincy attire, a regal fabric adorned with intricate patterns. He embraced the rituals and customs, learning about the importance of kola nuts and palm wine. Chidinma's family, initially intimidated by his wealth, was won over by his humility and his genuine respect for their culture. For the Lagos ceremony, Chidinma, the woman who once carried blocks, worked with a renowned fashion designer to create a wedding gown that incorporated elements of traditional Igbo embroidery. She chose a color palette that blended the rich, earthy tones of her village with the modern elegance of Namdi's world. The guest list, a who's who of Nigerian and international society, was expanded to include her entire village, flown to Lagos on chartered buses, a gesture of Namdi's love and a powerful statement about the importance of family. The preparations were a whirlwind of activity. But through it all, Namdi and Chidinma were an unshakable team. They were building something far more significant than a wedding. They were building a bridge, proving that love could not only span the gap between their two worlds but also enrich them both. The mansion in Enugu was nearing completion, but it was clear that their true masterpiece would be the beautiful life they were creating together, a life that celebrated every part of who they were. Namdi's car, a sleek, black Rolls-Royce, was an alien presence on the narrow, dusty road leading into Chidinma's village. The journey from Lagos to the rural heart of Enugu was a symbolic one, a crossing of a chasm that had once separated their lives. Namdi, for the first time in his life, felt a prickle of nerves that had nothing to do with a business deal. He was a man who owned empires, but in this place, he was a suitor seeking acceptance from a community that knew nothing of his world. Chidinma sat beside him, her hand in his, a quiet guide through this foreign land. "Don't be nervous," she said, sensing his tension. "They will see the man I love." When they arrived, the entire village seemed to have gathered. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter and the scent of wood smoke and roasting yam. The children, wide-eyed and curious, ran alongside the car. Namdi was led to the compound of Chidinma's family, where her mother, a woman with a kind face and hands as strong as her daughter's, waited with her relatives. The traditional marriage rites, the Igbankwu Nwanyi, were a vibrant celebration of culture and community. Namdi, dressed in a traditional Igbo chieftaincy attire, a stark but dignified contrast to his usual suits, was an active participant. He was given a palm wine to present to Chidinma's father, a symbolic gesture of his intention to marry his daughter. He was asked to prove his worth not with his bank account, but with his character. He faced a council of elders who asked him about his intentions, his family, and his respect for Chidinma's traditions. Namdi spoke from his heart, his words a powerful testament to his love. He spoke of Chidinma's strength and resilience, of her kindness and her dreams. He told them he was not just marrying her. He was joining their family and honoring their way of life. The villagers watched with a mixture of curiosity and growing respect. This was not the arrogant, detached billionaire they might have expected. This was a man who was humble, who was willing to learn, and who clearly adored their Chidinma. The men of the village gave their blessings, and the women embraced him, their smiles warm and genuine. As the ceremony reached its climax, Chidinma, carrying a small cup of palm wine, was sent to find her future husband. She walked through the crowd, her eyes searching for him. She saw him standing tall and proud, a look of pure adoration on his face. She knelt before him, a symbol of her reverence and commitment, and offered him the wine. He drank it, and the crowd erupted in cheers. In that moment, Namdi felt a profound peace. He had built skyscrapers and empires, but this was the first time he felt truly at home. He was no longer just the owner of a mansion. He was a son-in-law, a part of a community, a man who had earned his place not with money, but with love. He and Chidinma had not just joined hands. They had joined worlds, and the village, in its warmth and acceptance, had sealed their union with a blessing more valuable than any fortune. The wedding day arrived, a beautiful blend of tradition and modernity, a testament to the two worlds Namdi and Chidinma had so lovingly joined. The ceremony began in the early afternoon, under a vast, ornate canopy in the garden of a luxury hotel in Lagos. The guest list was a who's who of Nigerian and international society, but among the silk suits and designer gowns were the bright, colorful Ankara dresses and head ties of Chidinma's family and friends from the village. Chidinma walked down the aisle, not just as a bride, but as a queen. Her gown was a masterpiece, a fusion of classic Western design with subtle Igbo embroidery, a dress that spoke to her past and her future. Namdi watched her, tears welling in his eyes. He saw the woman he had first met on a dusty construction site, the woman who had carried blocks on her head with dignity and grace, and he knew he was the luckiest man in the world. He was no longer just the billionaire. He was the man who had found his soulmate in the most unexpected of places. The vows were a powerful reflection of their journey. Namdi spoke of how Chidinma had taught him that true wealth was not in possessions but in love and connection. Chidinma spoke of how Namdi had seen her not for her circumstances but for her heart, and how he had shown her a love she never dared to dream of. The reception was a jubilant affair, a joyous fusion of two cultures. A live orchestra from London played classical music, but the dance floor was soon taken over by the vibrant rhythms of a traditional Igbo band. Namdi, the CEO who rarely danced, was pulled onto the floor by Chidinma's exuberant family, his laughter ringing out across the room. The sight of the stoic billionaire dancing with a joyful abandon was a sight to behold and a powerful symbol of how completely Chidinma had transformed his life. Even Madame Beatrice, who had arrived with a stony face, found herself cracking a smile. She watched her son, truly happy for the first time in years, and saw the respect in his eyes as he danced with his new wife's family. The strength she had once dismissed as a front was real, and the love she had once feared was a genuine, life-altering force. The wedding of Namdi and Chidinma became a legend, a story whispered in the halls of power and celebrated in the quiet corners of a village. It was a powerful reminder that true connection transcends social status, and that love, when it is real, can build a bridge between any two worlds. It was not just a wedding. It was a testament to a beautiful, unlikely, and profoundly true love story. The mansion in Enugu, once just a symbol of Namdi's ambition, was now complete. Its polished floors and grand architecture stood in perfect harmony with the rolling hills that surrounded it. But for Namdi and Chidinma, it was more than a house. It was the foundation of their new life. They moved in after a simple private ceremony, a homecoming that was both intimate and profound. For Namdi, A man accustomed to a life of work and endless travel, the change was staggering. He had built his empire by being perpetually in motion, but now he found a deep, satisfying peace in being still. He started delegating more tasks to his senior executives, trusting them to manage the day-to-day operations. He wanted to be present, to be a husband, to learn what it meant to build a home, not just a house. Chidinma filled the empty rooms with warmth and life. She chose fabrics and furniture not for their price tag, but for their comfort and beauty. She added touches from her village, hand-woven baskets, colorful attire fabrics, and clay pots that gave the mansion a soul. The grand, impersonal space began to feel like a home. She showed Namdi how to appreciate the simple joys of life. The taste of a fresh ogbono soup she had cooked herself, the sound of rain on the roof, the quiet beauty of a sunset over the hills. Namdi, the man who had once only noticed numbers, now found himself noticing everything. He noticed the way Chidinma's smile lit up the kitchen, the way her laughter echoed through the long corridors, and the way she had created a sanctuary in a place that had once been a cold monument to his wealth. He found himself spending hours in the garden, a place he had never paid attention to before, watching her tend to the plants and herbs she had brought from her village. Their love was a quiet force, filling every corner of the house. They would sit on the balcony late at night, his arm around her, talking about their day, their dreams, and the future they were building together. The mansion, once a symbol of Namdi's power, was now a symbol of their love. It was a home, not just a building, and it was a masterpiece not because of its architecture, but because it was filled with the richness of their shared life. Chidinma's strength was not just in her ability to carry blocks. It was in her mind. Her quiet observation and intuitive business sense, honed from a lifetime of careful planning and hard work, proved to be an invaluable asset to Namdi. She found herself attending meetings with him, not as a silent partner, but as a thoughtful contributor. She would ask questions his seasoned executives never thought to ask, pointing out logistical flaws and suggesting more efficient ways to manage resources. Namdi was in awe of her. She saw his business not in terms of profits and losses, but in terms of people and purpose. One evening, as they were reviewing a report on a new housing development, Chidinma looked up from the documents. "Namdi," she said, "we are building all these beautiful homes, but what about the people who can't afford them? The ones who are just like me, who work every day with their hands, but have no hope of ever owning a piece of the land they helped build?" Her question struck a chord deep within him. It was a truth he had long ignored, a void he had tried to fill with more and more wealth. Chidinma's dream of a provision store had blossomed into a far grander vision, one that matched his own scale but was rooted in her values. "We can do something," she continued, her voice filled with quiet passion. "We can create a foundation, one that gives microloans to people who want to start small businesses, one that offers vocational training and scholarships to young Nigerians. We can give them the tools to build their own futures, to turn their labor into a legacy." The idea was revolutionary for Namdi. For the first time in his life, his business was not about acquiring more, but about giving back. They worked together, side by side, to lay the groundwork for the Okoye Foundation. Namdi handled the legal and financial logistics, using his expertise to build a robust and sustainable organization. Chidinma became its heart, drawing on her deep understanding of the struggles of everyday Nigerians to shape the foundation's mission and programs. The Okoye Foundation was not just a philanthropic arm of his empire. It was a testament to their love, a living legacy of their journey. It was a bridge between their two worlds, built to help others cross the divides they had so successfully overcome. The foundation's motto, born from one of their late-night conversations, was simple and profound: from labor to legacy. Namdi watched Chidinma as she spoke to the first group of scholarship recipients, her face radiant with purpose. He had once believed that success was a solitary pursuit, a mountain to be climbed alone. But with Chidinma, he had discovered a new kind of success, a fulfillment that came not from a bulging bank account, but from a purpose that was shared, a mission that was born from love. He had found not just a wife, but a partner in every sense of the word, a woman who had given his life a meaning far richer than he had ever dreamed possible. The love that Namdi and Chidinma shared was a powerful force, but it couldn't erase the fundamental differences in their backgrounds. Adjusting to their new life in the mansion, a world so vastly different from the one they had known, came with its own set of growing pains. Namdi, the CEO who had built his life on relentless work, found it difficult to slow down. He would often receive calls and urgent emails late into the night, his mind instantly shifting back to the world of business. He'd find himself working from his home office for hours, losing track of time, only to look up and realize Chidinma had gone to bed alone. He was a man who had been defined by his ambition for so long that he didn't know how to exist without it. He loved being with Chidinma, but the habit of overworking was deeply ingrained. Chidinma, in turn, struggled with her new, public role. She was no longer just the hard-working Chidinma of the village. She was now Mrs. Okoye, the wife of a billionaire. The constant scrutiny, the endless stream of social events, and the pressure to conform to a certain standard were exhausting. She felt like an imposter in her own life. She had to learn a new way of dressing, of speaking, and of navigating a social world that was built on a superficial foundation. Her simple, authentic self felt out of place among the carefully curated personas of Namdi's peers. One evening, after a particularly draining dinner with Namdi's business associates, Chidinma retreated to her room, her heart heavy. Namdi found her there, her face tear-streaked. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "I feel like I don't belong here," she confessed, her voice choked with emotion. "I miss my simple life. I miss being me. This is not who I am." Namdi's heart ached. He had pulled her from her world and thrust her into his, believing that love would be enough. He realized he had been selfish, so caught up in his own happiness that he had forgotten to consider the cost to her. "You are who you are, Chidinma," he said, holding her close. "You belong wherever you are. And if this world doesn't accept you for who you are, then it is their loss, not yours." He knew he had to change. He began to set stricter boundaries for his work. He made a promise to himself that he would not take calls after a certain hour and that their evenings were to be sacred. He encouraged her to bring her world into their home, to invite her family and friends from the village to visit. He reminded her that the mansion was just a house. The home was in her heart. Their love had been tested by the outside world, but now they were facing the most important test of all: learning how to build a shared life that honored both of their truths, a life that was a true reflection of who they were, together. The growing pains, though difficult, were a necessary part of their journey. Namdi, with a newfound sense of purpose, learned to delegate his work and prioritize his home life. He started coming home earlier, leaving his business in the capable hands of his team. He learned to find joy in the mundane, in the quiet evenings spent with Chidinma, in the shared laughter over a simple meal. Chidinma, in turn, found her footing. She realized that she didn't have to be someone she wasn't. Her strength and authenticity were what Namdi loved about her. She started inviting her family and friends from the village to visit, and their presence filled the vast, sterile mansion with a vibrant energy it had never known. The grand living room, once a formal and used space, was now filled with the sound of her mother's folk songs and the lively chatter of her siblings. The mansion, once a cold monument to Namdi's ambition, became a true home. The polished floors now held the scuffs of children's shoes. The grand dining table, once used for formal business dinners, was now a place for boisterous family meals. The quiet solitude of the compound was broken by the sounds of laughter and the warm scent of traditional cooking. Namdi, the man who had once been so isolated, now found himself surrounded by family, by love, and by a sense of belonging that his wealth could never buy. He looked at Chidinma one afternoon, watching her as she helped her young niece with her schoolwork. She was a picture of radiant happiness, her face glowing with a joy that was both profound and peaceful. He had built a masterpiece of stone and steel, but she had transformed it into a masterpiece of love and family. The house was no longer his. It was theirs. It was a place where two worlds had not just met, but had beautifully merged, creating a sanctuary that was more valuable than any empire. The story of Dr. Nnamdi Okoye and Chidinma Okafor became a legend that transcended the glossy pages of magazines and the fleeting updates on social media. It was a story told in quiet whispers in the bustling markets of Lagos and shared with a sense of wonder in the tranquil villages of Enugu. It was a tale that reminded people that a person's worth was not in their possessions but in their character. Nnamdi's peers, who had once scoffed at his choice, now looked upon his marriage with a mixture of envy and respect. They saw the profound happiness he exuded, a contentment that their own meticulously planned, socially advantageous unions had failed to provide. His success, once measured in profits and properties, was now judged by the radiant love he shared with his wife. He had taught them that true wealth was a life lived with purpose and a heart filled with genuine connection. Chidinma, in turn, became a beacon of hope for young girls in her village and beyond. Her story was a powerful testament to the fact that a person's beginning does not have to dictate their end. They saw her, a woman who had once carried blocks on her head, now standing tall beside a billionaire, not as a trophy wife, but as an equal partner. She was proof that dreams could be realized through hard work, resilience, and a love that defied all expectations. Their life became a public testament to their journey. The Okoye Foundation, born from Chidinma's vision, flourished. It became a powerful force for change, providing a pathway to education and entrepreneurship for countless young Nigerians. The foundation's motto, "From labor to legacy," resonated deeply with a nation built on the strength and resilience of its people. The mansion in Enugu, a physical symbol of their story, became a living monument. Visitors would often come to the gates, not to gawk at its grandeur, but to catch a glimpse of the unlikely couple who had turned a house into a home and a legend into a life. Their love was a living legacy, a powerful narrative of how two worlds, once thought to be irreconcilable, could be beautifully and profoundly joined. It was a story that inspired others, reminding them that the most valuable thing one could build was a future with someone who saw and loved them for who they truly were. Years passed, and the mansion on the Enugu Hills stood as a living testament to a love story that had become a legend. Nnamdi and Chidinma, no longer just a billionaire and a laborer, were now a team, a partnership built on a foundation of respect, trust, and a love that had defied all odds. Their family grew. The pitter-patter of little feet echoed through the halls of the mansion, and the laughter of their children filled the home with a joyous symphony. Nnamdi, the man who had once been isolated by his wealth, now found his greatest joy in the simple moments of fatherhood. He taught his son how to kick a football and his daughter how to plant a seed, sharing the wisdom he had gained from both the boardroom and the village. The Okoye Foundation, born from Chidinma's vision and Nnamdi's resources, had grown into a powerful force for change. It had built schools, funded scholarships, and provided microloans to countless Nigerians, helping them turn their labor into a legacy. Chidinma, with Nnamdi by her side, became a respected leader, a woman whose wisdom and grace were sought after by leaders and ordinary people alike. One evening, as the sun set over the rolling hills, casting a golden glow over their home, Nnamdi and Chidinma sat together on the balcony, their hands intertwined. They looked out at the beautiful landscape, at the majestic mansion that had once been just a blueprint, and they reflected on their incredible journey. "Do you remember," Nnamdi said, his voice soft, "the day I first saw you, carrying those blocks on your head?" Chidinma smiled, the memory as clear as the setting sun. "I thought you were just a curious man who asked too many questions." He squeezed her hand. "You were building a house, Chidinma, but you were also building a future for us. You were building our home." The future they had built was more than they could have ever imagined. It was a life built not just with cement and steel, but with love, respect, and a bond that was stronger than any mansion. Their story, once a tale of two different worlds, had become a single, beautiful narrative, a powerful reminder that the most valuable thing one could build was a future with someone who saw and loved them for who they truly were. And as they sat there, two souls intertwined in a quiet, perfect moment, they knew their legacy was not in the wealth they had accumulated, but in the love they had built together.